It's story time. Story time. Let's read it story time. Story time. I'm geeked at story time. Story time. You and me, it's story time. Story time. Let's achieve. Hello, my beautiful K crew, and welcome to story time with me, Kayla. How's your Sunday doing? Did you do anything cool? Let me know in the comments below. Now today we have another special author feature. We will take a look at a book from Tangular Irby, who is an author, an educator, and a quilter. We had the pleasure of reading her first book, and we are back today to read her second. So without further ado, the book we will be reading tonight is called Charles and His G's Bin Quilt, written by Tangular A. Irby and illustrated by Sheana. You ready to see what this book is all about? Ready, set, let's begin. Charles and His G's Bin Quilt, written by Tangular A. Irby and illustrated by Sheana. Here we go. Before, last time we learned about Pearl, and today we're learning about Charles, because guess what? Boys can quilt too, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can only do your best. Tangular A. Irby, thank you so much. I love me a good signed book, an autographed book. Here we go. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, Charles sat playing in the living room with his friends, Lucius and Robert, as the aroma of homemade biscuits, smothered chicken, rice, collard greens from the garden, and Grandma's famous tea cakes filled the house. Ooh, that sounds like a good Sunday afternoon. I want to be there. Wow, that quilt is amazing, Lucius said. My mom has quilts like this at our house. Grandma told me I come from a long line of G's Bin quilters whose quilts have been displayed in galleries and museums all over, Charles proudly boasted. When I get older, I'm going to make quilts too, and one of my quilts will hang over there one day. Charles pointed to the empty space where he intended to hang his work. Ooh, a nice space for his quilt to hang beautifully on display. That's pretty neat. I've never heard of that before. What are G's Bin quilts? Lucius asked, wide-eyed. Charles sat up straight with confidence. Back when my grandma was younger, the house she lived in did not have any heat, so she and her siblings used quilts to keep warm during winter. The families who lived in G's Bin, Alabama, were very large. Some had 10 or more children, so they needed lots of quilts. Ooh. They did need a lot of quilts. They would need one for each child and then the parents. They would tear up old clothing to use for fabric. The women would move from house to house, quilting during the evening. During the day, many of them worked at the Freedom Quilting Bee. They would use sewing machines to piece together the tops, but they quilted them together by hand. Lucius and Robert listened in amazement, surprised that their playdate had turned into a fantastic lesson about Charles' family history. That is amazing. Can you imagine quilting all those blankets? Like if you did have to do 10 or more quilts, you had to do it by hand. You did the top with the sewing machine, but you had to really use your hand to hand sew. Grandma always says, quilts are like your handwriting, Charles explained. She says every quilt should be different from everyone else's. I asked Grandma how she comes up with so many different designs. She told me she talks to God when she quilts, and He gives her an idea every time. I told her that I am not sure that I will be able to quilt the way she does, but she told me, you can only do your best. You cannot do my best. That's true. Everyone else's best is different, so only do your best. Helping Grandma is exciting. Charles tossed his hands in the air with a warm smile. I get to pick the pieces of fabric that she will use next or thread the tiny needle. Sometimes I thread 3 or 4 so they will be ready when she needs them. She even lets me fix her sewing machine when it won't work. That does seem pretty fun. Have you ever tried threading the needle in the little tiny needle hole? Oh my goodness. He has some good eyes for that. Lucius and Robert lay on their bellies as Charles recounted the rest of his story, his voice rising and falling like he was singing a song. Grandma says quilting isn't always easy. Sometimes the fabric is very thick and she has to use a thimble to keep from pricking herself. One time she struck herself and I could tell she was vexed. But no matter what, Grandma keeps quilting. She knows that those quilts are so needed, and so she was pushing through. That's very nice of Grandma. It sounds like your grandma knows what she is doing, Robert said. I bet you can't make one. Yes I can, Charles blurted in response to Robert's challenge. Since you think you know everything, listen to this. He's about to spit the facts. The most important part of the quilt is the top. To make her special designs, Grandma sews many different scraps together. Sometimes she uses my old clothes that don't fit anymore or Grandpa's old t-shirts. Charles spoke quickly, telling everything he learned, but paused to take a breath before starting again. When the top is finished, the rest of the quilt is ready to be stitched together. Did you know that? Charles crossed his arms in satisfaction when Lucius and Robert shook their heads, then went on. The middle layer is called the batting. When Grandma was little, sharecroppers grew the cotton and they would pick, then flatten it for the quilts. Next comes the backing. Quilters used to use 25-pound flour sacks for the backing, but now we can go to the store to buy everything that we need. So back in the day, they really had to use what they had. So they would have the flour stacks. So instead of like throwing that away, they would use it to create a quilt. That's pretty amazing. Do you have any questions? Charles asked his friends. No, they answered in unison. Good, Charles said. Now when all of the pieces are together, the backing is folded to the front and the quilt is binded together. Some people quilt straight lines, crooked lines, patterns, or designs. Sometimes Grandma follows the design on the quilt top. Then there are times when she sews puzzle patterns. She says that it depends on what God says when they talk. I like looking on the back of the quilt to see her designs. See, sometimes they have a little waves. They could go straight, a straight line. What kind of pattern would you put on your quilt if you were making one? Wow, Charles, you are right, Robert exclaimed. You know a lot about quilting. Grandma says that me and my cousins need to learn so that the world will know about our quilts too. Keep that legacy alive. The boys hadn't noticed that Grandma sneaked in to eavesdrop and hear Charles teaching his friends so well. She held a few quilts in her arms as she addressed the boys with a sweet smile. It sounds like Charles has been watching and listening, Grandma beamed with pride. He knows all about our family quilts and where they came from. We didn't have a lot of money back then, but we always had our quilts. Our elders gave us quilts as gifts, especially when we moved up north. We got them when we married. We even got them when we came back down south for visits. Robert and Lucius, I have a gift for you. Here are your very own G's Ben quilts. Take good care of them. Yes, very good care of them. Grandma handed each boy a quilt and was delighted to hear them cheer with excitement. On the back of your quilt, I have signed my name and written the name of the quilt. No one else has a quilt like yours. One day you can pass it down to your own children and tell them the story of G's Ben Quilts. Yay! I want one, I want one. The end. And here are some facts about the book. And the artistry comes from Miss Petway, who was born and raised in G's Bend, Alabama. And here are some designs. See how you can have different patterns going different ways? So fun. The end. Wonderful. Yes, K-Crew! There is so much history in the G's Ben Quilts, and I hope this book inspired you to learn even more. I'm going to leave a couple of links in the description box, so make sure to check that out. And fun fact, Amy Sherald, who is famous for her Michelle Obama portrait, was actually inspired from the G's Ben Quilt, so that is amazing. Now, I hope you all enjoyed reading this book as much as I did. To find your copy, make sure to head on over to her website, and you can also find this book on Amazon, and be sure to follow her on social media. And while you're grabbing your copy, make sure to check out the first book and the activity book. You will not be disappointed. A big thank you to Miss Tangular for teaching us some pretty cool history and keeping the legacy alive. I thank you all out there for joining me, but it's time to sing goodbye. Are we ready? Here we go. Goodbye, 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 my friends. Goodbye to you. I hope to see you again real soon. Be proud of all your work tonight. Now climb into bed and sleep real tight. On the count of 3, let's say goodnight. 1, 2,